the Shield. I'm here with my brother and colleague Hassan Barnes, and you're joining the maiden voyage of money, power, and politics. Enough is enough. You may recall that we started this journey some weeks ago with a program called the Board Watch. That was dedicated to trying to inform the public about the activities, the actions of the Baltimore City Board of Estimates, particularly those actions relating to the award of contracts, grants, and other financial matters relating to the city. What we discovered in short order was that it was nearly impossible to confine our attention and our remarks to Baltimore City's Board of Estimates because much of the financing of the city comes from outside sources, particularly sources emanating from either the state or the federal government. And nor could we avoid that topic which the whole world seems to be somewhat consumed with, and that is, of course, Donald J. Trump, Elon Musk, and the Musketeers. And we're going to start today's program with a Musk-type discussion. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and friend, Hassan Barnes, to talk about whether or not these tech billionaires such as Musk have too much influence over what's happening at the federal government level, which of course spills over into state and local government administrations as well. Hassan, what do you think?
So there's a conversation to be had. Historically, the U.S. is different than Europe, right? People left Europe to escape the tyrant, which was the king, and with the church, and came to America to have a different community. They wanted to have a democracy. They built a community without a king, but also without much wealth. The people came here and settled here weren't particularly wealthy. The idea that we have a democracy that is democratic has been sold into the politic. It's not quite true. We're not a democracy. We're a democratic republic, which is different. But people believe that one person, one vote is how things should go. The reality is it doesn't. We're seeing in real time, and I'm sure it's happened before, we didn't see it. With the inclusion of Elon Musk and the Trump administration is very transparent. We look at Europe as having oligarchs, or not Europe, Russia as oligarchs, people who are very, very wealthy, and the government, and they work together hand in hand. We're seeing it in real time now. Now, maybe before I was born, when Henry Ford was around, he was an oligarch and he was able to get things done. Elon Musk, as he's going through Doge and he's doing things, he's personally involved with government services where he can show up and say, you're fired, you're fired, you're fired. Even though in my mind, they say he's a special government employee. That part isn't clear to me that he really is. But we are having people who are extremely wealthy and they control how things operate. We're seeing the Doge, Department of Governmental Efficiency, go around and fire federal employees, fire American citizens, fire people who've been in the job for 20 years. And they claim they're firing them for purposes of the people weren't doing good jobs, but they're not. We got 150 people here, half you guys get fired. At the same time, we're seeing more and more contracts go to Elon Musk companies, whether it's SpaceX, whether it's Starlink, whether it's Tesla, and he's getting more money than they're saving in firing American citizens. It's a problem. Bill Ackman is a famous or well-known billionaire who was, when Trump gave his tariffs and he went up to, I think, 150%, I'm not sure what number it was, Ackman came out and said, hey, we need to pause on this and do a 90-day pause. The administration did a pause after it came out. Citizens can't reach the president. He can go on TV and say, yeah, Mr. President or administration, I don't think you're going the right way. Let's pull back, and they pull back. That's scary.
Now, of course, when Trump announced his tariffs, the base tariff being 10% and up to 125% or more for China, for Canada, for Mexico, the market went haywire. Stocks went, the bottom fell out. Some of Trump's closest friends and associates, such as Marjorie Taylor Greene, decided to go in and scoop up a bunch of stocks. And then, of course, when he decided a day or two later to pause, let the stock, they bounced back up, and all of a sudden she became more of a millionaire than she was the day before. Some people think that that's very much like what happened with Martha Stewart and what Martha Stewart went to jail for.
I'll say this, and this is no, if I was in a situation where I knew with Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Right.
I may have more stocks as well. So I can't say that I wouldn't have done it, but that's a whole different story, whether or not Trump. The thrust of my point is we shouldn't, and it's unsettling that most Americans are billionaires. Most Americans are millionaires. Most Americans go to work every day, come home, take care of their family, and try to make a living. Things get more expensive, and it's getting harder to live. People who have more means shouldn't have the power to dictate their wealth the way they do. Because certainly Ackerman can say, hey, I'm losing too much money here. This got to stop. Well, a billionaire losing money, they have more money now than most Americans have in generations of their lifetime. Not only them, their mothers, their grandparents, their great-grandparents. So one person with billions and billions of dollars can say, nah, I don't like the way things are going, and you stop it when a family of four in Wyoming can barely put food on the table. It's a problem.
But hasn't that always been the so-called American way that when you talk about, look at the industry of political campaigning. I mean, billions of dollars spent in the aggregate between local, state, and federal elections. And aren't those elected officials customarily more accountable to, and certainly more accessible to those who give the largest campaign donations? Isn't the whole system a pay-to-play system?
So I would say in politics in general, yes. Whenever there's a person who has power and a person has money, at some point there's a conversation,
right,
and the person who has power gets some of that money. They don't get all of it, but
right,
they get some of it.
Right.
I'm not, I said earlier, I don't, certainly when Henry Ford was around, I'm sure Henry Ford got to do what he wanted to do because he was a huge industrialist. Yeah. But to be open, to have it an open part of the body politic, the idea that you can come in openly and buy and pay and have, so you have a bigger, because there's no argument that Peter Thiel is paying Trump for anything. It's the idea that he has more standing to say things because he's a billionaire. And that shouldn't be the case. Because the reality is what it does is it devalue American citizens. When we have people who are billionaires who can amass fortunes, most of us can't. I would love to be a billionaire. I don't got $1 billion. So I probably wouldn't be here today. I'd be somewhere hanging out with Peter Thiel or Ackerman. I doubt that. But it's a different story.
Yeah, but isn't it the banality of what we're seeing, the brazenness, the arrogance? Yeah. Isn't that Trump's brand? I mean, it's in a sense, it's good that people can put a name and a face behind the one who seems to be pulling the strings. But the idea that it's being done not for the purpose of transparency, but simply because this is Trump's way of doing business, period, that he can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, and not without being accountable to anybody.
And you're right, that is Trump's brand. The issue is it's not America's brand. We've historically identified ourselves as being democracy and able to do things the fair way. People come around the world from other countries come here because of oligarchs, because they can't get a living in other countries. They come here because the idea that it's fair, it's easier, you have a better chance of making a life here. Trump brand is open, it's brazen, and it's for the people who have more means. If we, as Americans, co-sign and say, yeah, Trump, right, we should do it this way, we all suffer. We don't all have billions of dollars. We all don't have millions of dollars. And the least of us, primarily, certainly in my community, the Black community, we're so far down the totem pole that keeps us purposefully from having any influence in the life we live. Keep in mind, the people who vote aren't the billionaires. They may vote, but so few of them are inconsequential.
Right.
So the voters are the ones who have the least. The middle class and the lower middle class are the ones, the majority of the voters. And if they're voting for people to give billionaires more money and for them to have less money, that in of itself is contrary to what we should be doing or contrary to the American way.
But Trump keeps saying, I'm doing what I was elected to do. I'm doing what 79 million voters elected me to do. Now, the other 75 million who voted for other people, you don't count anymore because you're not my supporters. But I'm just focusing on the 79 million that voted for me. So is he right? Did those 79 million people vote for him to engage Elon Musk on this campaign of reduction in the federal workforce, of cutting so-called waste and fraud? Is that what did the people vote for him to eliminate their jobs and to impose tariffs that's going to cost a rise in the cost of consumer goods in untold amounts for generations? Is that what people elected him to do?
So people elect people for different reasons. They elect someone who they think like they do. So they say, I'm going to elect you because you're similar to me. And if I were in your shoes, I'll make the decision. So I trust that you would do everything I would do. Other people vote and say, no, I don't know what the hell's going on, But I think he's smart, or she's smart, so I'm gonna vote for her, and she can handle it. I don't think most American citizens voted for Trump for the idea that he would increase prices, that he would wreck the economy, that he would fire half the federal workforce because he thinks it's a good idea, that he would give Elon Musk unfettered access to federal government largesse, that he would bring his billionaire friends in to get richer and richer and richer. Most Americans are adverse to the idea that billionaires get more and they get less. I don't think you can find, and it doesn't matter the race or ethnicity or creed, most Americans don't like the idea that eggs are so expensive you can't get your kids breakfast in the morning, where billionaires making $10 billion more. Most Americans wouldn't agree with that. So he says it. He says, yeah, I'm doing what I was elected to do. No, when you're elected, you have certain things you want to do. You said immigration, which people didn't think of either way it is now. And you say you want to have America standing back in the world, but it was very vague. You mentioned tariffs, but no one thought you were going to do 150, 200% tariffs on China. No one thought the rest of the world was going to reel from your actions because they can't afford to do business with America anymore because the tariffs are so expensive. No one thought that because he didn't say it. He didn't advertise on that.
Well, I mean, and the fact of the matter is that what he did say was erroneous. I mean, he said, for example, that the tariffs would be paid by China, or it would be paid by Canada, or Mexico, or
he was lying. He was lying.
But is that true? Is who pays tariffs?
So we talked about this in the prior episode, and I'm sure most Americans know now, you will pay the tariff. So if we place a tariff on goods from China, what it means is when a company imports goods from China, they have to pay the U.S. government a tariff, which means a tax. And so the company that's going to get the goods in the States is paying the actual tariff. So it could be, say it's Nike. Nike shipped a bunch of shoes from China for local Foot Locker. Well, they're paying a tariff on all the shoes they bring in, which means what? They're going to increase the prices. Lo and behold, people who are wealthy don't believe in cutting back. They believe in getting their value. So they're going to increase the prices, which means what? Parents are paying the tariffs. When you go buy your kid a pair of Nikes and they're worth $49 in the store, now they're $85, you just pay the tariff. Surprise! Thank you, President Trump. So his idea, so when he says China pays, same when he said, let's go build in the wall, he says all kind of things that aren't true. He was saying things that weren't true before he was president. Listening to him and the way he used language is inaccurate, and no one ever corrects him because he's Donald Trump. But the person that pays the tariff typically is the end user. The buyer of the good is the person that typically is the person that's paying the tariffs on the back end.
Well, you know, the media that has attempted to try to fact check him, for example, he says he looked at the balance of trade between the U.S. and Canada and Mexico, and he says, "Oh, who made such a terrible deal? I've never seen such a thing." And then, of course, you look back, and in 2018, he's the one who made the deal that he now says is so bad. But he's scared. It seems to me he's bullied the media off, but he sued CBS. They settled. He sued 60 Minutes for an interview with Kamala Harris. They're about to settle. You know, so see, he scared Zuckerberg into eliminating fact check on Facebook or Meta, whatever you want to call it. So his position that he is unaccountable to anybody seems to have worked, not just with the public but also with the media. So then where are the people left who want to know the truth? If there's no more fact checking, and if we're in an era where truth doesn't matter.
I go back to billionaires. It's not the media, it's billionaires. Keep in mind, before during the election, before the actual vote, Amazon founder, what's his name? Sheesh. He owned the Washington Post, and normally Bezos, and normally they do editorial as to who they think should be a good candidate. He decided we're not doing that no more. We're not pitting out for the war in politics. You're a newspaper. It's part of your cause, which you're supposed to do. No, we're not doing it anymore. Same way Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg bent the knee. He was around Trump. He went to the inauguration. He gave money to Trump. All the billionaires lined up and gave money like oligarchs to Trump. And they did what he wanted because they wanted something from him. Certainly, before the first administration, Facebook wasn't a friend of Donald Trump. He was rallying against him. And what happened, even though Zuckerberg has cozied up to him, they're going to go after Zuckerberg now and try to break apart Facebook. Nothing that's been done by the billionaires has helped the people. It's helped their own pockets. So when they got in line, such as the media, it's not the media, it's the actual own. People left the Washington Post after Bezos' actions. The media is inclined, but the people who own the media in recent years. So before, media was owned by conglomerations. Now people own media outlets as fund.
Well, the media in this country print, broadcast, whatever, is owned by 6 corporations.
Yes.
6 corporations own all the media.
You said corporation. Typically, the corporations are closely held corporations.
Yeah, they're owned by,
Bezos
they're owned or controlled by certain individuals.
Yes, so it's a guy at the top that can say, you can make a phone call. You're not doing that.
Right.
So that changes the landscape of what media is. So typically we think media is independent. It is independent. But it's independent, but the person that's dependent on, the owner, is a friend and or a confidant or a person who wants to be close to Trump. It changes the dynamic in a way that's not reasonable.
And since we're talking about media, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the issue of free speech and go to Trump's attack against the institutions of higher education. Harvard, Columbia, Cornell, Princeton, Brown, all of the institutions, and most of which to date have crumbled under the pressure of withholding billions of dollars in federal funding for research and other grants. The rationale, as I understand it, is if you are whether you're Palestinian or not, but if you speak out against what Israel is doing in Gaza and in the West Bank to the Palestinian people, that means you are a supporter of Hamas. If you are a supporter of Hamas, that means you are an enemy of the United States. If you are an enemy of the United States and the supporter of Hamas, that also means you are anti-Semitic. And so when you connect the dots in the way that he connects, you end up with students, faculty members, physicians, anybody and everybody who's published or stated anything in conversations, casual or formal, that against what Israel is doing. Ultimately, you got to watch your back, so to speak, because you wind up with people in mass pulling up behind you as you carry your groceries in the house and they're snatching you. And you end up in a detention in Louisiana or Texas on your way to El Salvador.
So what we've seen recently in universities have been nothing short of tremendous. We've seen universities, as you say, bend the knee or kowtow or relent to Trump's administration decisions. The issue of the war in Palestine and what side you're on has led people to be deported from the country. It's led people to be people are getting taken off the streets as if we're in a third world country. People are being abducted and or relocated in a way that's 10 years ago I would have thought would be impossible. Universities have been the bastion of free speech my whole lifetime. We go to university and they have all kinds of speakers on university. I recall being in school, they would bring conservative speakers in, and people, I say conservative, maybe conservative is the wrong, they use the word conservative. They brought people in who will be hostile to blacks, and they will have, but it's free speech, so they have a right to speak, and it'll be people protesting, some kids will turn their back on the person they speak, and they'll be there. They'll be in the space. I recall I was taking my daughter on a tour for colleges. We went to UVA, and I think a year prior they had Charlottesville. They had Klan march on campus, and I'm going through a tour with one of the tour leaders. It was a young African American woman who was touring. She was saying it was hard to come back. I forgot about the Charlottesville thing. I wasn't close to it, and my daughter was on a tour. There was a bunch of people there, families everywhere. We went to a beautiful campus, and the young lady was like, "Yeah, here is where they marched." I'm like, "Who marched?" She's like, "The Klan." Well, what you mean the Klan? Like, yeah, the Klan marched on campus. They had tiki torches. Right. So you had Klan, which identified themselves with self-hate or hate of others, primarily blacks. You have black students on campus, and you imagine sitting down reading the book, and you look up, and some guys with white sheets on, with torches walking past you. The visual and the school allowed it. So why? Free speech. We believe in free speech that much, where we're willing to allow what I would call a terrorist organization, which is a Klan, come on a campus where black students operate and live and work and go to school and march to express their political views. Their political views is nothing short of hate. We allow that. But when we come to people saying, hey, we shouldn't be killing Palestinians, we can't allow that. And now people get deported out of the country, people get expelled from school, people are feeling unsafe. I can guarantee you, if I was on campus, I would have felt unsafe with people with torches. At the point where I remember that, they did have this in Charlottesville. Hey, baby, you ready to go home? We don't need to tour school anymore. But the idea that other issues are much more. And I didn't hear any school say, hey, they would rather have the Klan on campus. What they said was, we believe in free speech. And we can have multiple ideas to discuss and debate on university, because that's what we do. Now we're saying, yeah, except if it's this issue, the administration said no. So going forward, you can't debate that or talk about that or express any, even if your expression isn't adverse. I mean, I've heard people. It was an article recently. A young woman, I believe she was African American, was performing, I think, at Columbia, and she had made statements in the past about the war in Gaza, and they decided to pull her because students felt they said they didn't feel safe.
Well, they just canceled some R&B singer
Yeah,
that was supposed to perform at Cornell.
Was it Cornell? I thought it was Columbia.
Cornell, yeah. They canceled her. They canceled her performance. She was the headliner. I don't know enough about music.
I don't know her. I don't know the statement. I read the statements. Basically, she was saying, I don't think she was anti-Israel. Actually, it seemed like she was anti the war. And that was enough for people for students came out and said, we don't feel safe with her being here. Not that she was an abuser or harm someone, just the fact that she made a statement that she was against the war was enough for students to say, we don't feel safe, and her being here is offensive.
And the irony is people conflate Israel with Jews, and they're not the same, because people are being deported from this country because they stand against the government of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, who's been indicted more than Trump, actually. Yeah. But at the same time, people are being deported from here. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis are protesting right today against the same thing in Israel.
And my thing, and I think you're right. I think it's new ones because you don't see those protests. But people, I mean, Israel is a country, which means multiple political parties, means multiple ideas. My thing is, as American people, the idea that our higher education institutions change their view because the president said so is destroying our universities and destroying what we say our democracy is. The rest of the world can see this. We can see it. Students can see it. If we say these universities are on Ivory Towers and they're so high-minded, you go there and learn high-minded ideas, but the minute someone comes in and say we don't like it, they change their mind, it tells you that what they say their ideals aren't real, and they're not high-minded, and they're not legitimate.
You're an attorney. You've in your practice over the years, I think you probably handled some criminal matters. At what point does my declaration of my feelings toward another person amount to a legally actionable?
It does.
I mean, if I say I hate you, or I wish you were dead, and you feel uncomfortable about that because nobody would feel comfortable with something. But are those statements protected under free speech, or is the fact that you feel uncomfortable by my saying it mean that I can no longer say it?
So there's instances where your speech is kept, but it's not based on criminal law, it's based on employment law. So if you say things to an employee or to a coworker and they feel uneasy, you may have grounds to have them fired or have grounds to have the employer come in to have a work environment that's copacetic, so it's not a hostile work environment. So you have your ground to say you can't talk to your employees or your coworkers in a way that's offensive. But that's not a criminal thing. That's a civil thing. We have to have an organization in an organized workplace. Criminally, saying I hate you, I can't stand you, I wish you were dead, it doesn't. It's not an offense. It may be offensive. It's not an offense. So people use racial language to people. That's not a criminal violation. People use misogynistic language. They can call women all kind of things. Don't go to jail for that. You can get fired from a job for it, but not go to jail for it. So criminally, no. But the civil law and the criminal law are distinctly different. What we're seeing here is they're using immigration law as a way to almost make it a criminal law for you to have certain views on college campuses. So they're using as a way because they haven't yet deported American citizens, although they still let up to America.
Yeah.
I don't think they've deported them. I know they deported people who were here legally, but not people who were born American.
There was one instance of an actual American citizen who I think was picked up. Now, they haven't been deported yet, but they've been picked up by ICE. And there are several instances that I know of where people who are here with green cards, permanent resident cards, whose authorization has been revoked because, according to Marco Rubio, if we had known at the time you were granted that status, that eventually you would take a position that was contrary to what we believe to be the national interest of the country, we would never have given it to you. So the green card was given what we would call improvidently.
Well, Marco Rubio's statement is contrary. He's an attorney as well. It's contrary to law. There's no statement to say you have to follow the same. Your politics have to be what we say they are. There's no requirement in immigration law for that to be the case. Now, if you say I'm coming here to overthrow the United States government, then yes, there will be a conversation like we can't let you here. But if you are, when I was in law school, the dean was from Chile. He talked about he escaping the death march of Pinochet. In Pinochet's death march, he was killing lawyers funny enough. And he escaped, Claudio Grossman, he escaped the death march and made it to the United States. If the United States government was supporting Pinochet, he said, hey, I don't support him, he killed my family, they wouldn't have said, well, we will send you back because we do support him. It would have been outrageous. That's not how immigration law works. And his statement that if we knew you had your own individual ideas and political views, we wouldn't let you in. You would let no one in. Everyone has free speech as a right given to Americans, but given to people, or not only to Americans. It is always a conversation. We talk about who has what rights. If you're in the country, most of the rights that Americans have, you have as well. So the right to free speech is anyone in the country. They don't. The law doesn't read, well, right to free speech, unless you were born in Venezuela, then when you come here, you can't say anything. That's not how it works. Free speech is a general. We assume some rights are inalienable, which means you have them by the fact that you were born and you're a human being. Not that you're an American or Venezuelan or you're from Panama or you're from Turkmenistan. The fact that you're a human being, you have these rights. So your country may not like them. So China may not say, we don't believe in free speech. In Europe, they don't believe in certain free speech when it comes to certain things. Here, you can walk around with a Confederate flag on. The Confederate flag has been a symbol for racial oppression and violence towards black folks. And the person that said word.
You know, you're speaking of citizenship. One of the 125 or so executive orders that Trump issued in the first 100 days of his presidency had to do with ending what he calls birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment, which historically has been interpreted to mean if you were born in the United States, you were an American citizen. There are those in the Trump administration who say that no, that was not the intent of the Congress at that time. It was that only applied to black people who were newly freed from slavery. But that Trump's stand on that issue, along with at least 16 others, have been the subject of lawsuits, and Trump has been several courts, 17 to be exact, have issued orders against prohibiting Trump from going forward with his so-called plan. Now, another of the plans has to do with the complete elimination of this thing called so-called DEI, which, if you don't know what that means, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Translation: if you have any program that would create a preference, particularly a preference based upon race, translation: if you have a program that's intended, or that you say is for the benefit of black folk, it's automatically unconstitutional because it discriminates against white people. If you are black and you have a job in government, there is an irrebuttable presumption in Trump's administration that you got it, not because you were qualified, but because you're black, and therefore you got it over a more competent white person who would have had that job but for DEI. Now, but it seems as though very few people, in the media or otherwise, have drilled down to that. They're still talking about it in a very intellectual and high-minded way, but in reality, it's really attack. And why do I say that? Because when he ordered the Smithsonian to get rid of the exhibits on slavery, that's not DEI. When he ordered the military to get rid of the history of black folks, including Jackie Robinson even, that's not DEI. Yeah. When he shut down the Minority Business Development Agency within the Department of Commerce that was dedicated to trying to provide financial and other support for minority business, that's not DEI. So under the guise of getting rid of DEI, which itself is problematic, it's really, in my estimation, an attack against black people.
So DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and it still came around this country based on the inequity blacks saw after slavery, after Jim Crow, everybody equal. After all the instances of Black Wall Streets where whites would come in and kill and destroy and take from black communities when they started to build up. The redlining, the list of things the country did to black folks to prevent them from having a basic life is innumerable. We can talk about it for 2 or 3 episodes, just listing all the places. DEI was an attempt to find a way to mediate that. It wasn't an attempt to have people who are not qualified get jobs. The reality is, and most black folks can tell you, being qualified isn't enough to go for a job interview. So we typically, in most workforces, the black employees are the most qualified people there. Because if the standard is high school diploma, we're not getting them a high school diploma. We need a degree,
Right.
even though your colleagues may have diplomas. So the idea isn't that you get unqualified blacks, and it's the idea that they won't hire them otherwise. There has to be a law in place. Hit the EEOC. They won't hire them otherwise because of their race and or their gender. So when you're seeing the Trump administration go forward with DEI, it hasn't only been against blacks. And that part's interesting to me. The media hasn't been able to capture it. It's been against blacks, against white women who've gotten many jobs based on their gender, and other minorities. Even the programs in the government for preferences for military personnel.
Well, the white women have been included, but when they lose their jobs, I mean, if it goes back to another white man, they live together.
Well, no, that part's true.
I mean, you don't have the same economic loss or family decimation as you do.
But the media is seeing in real time that verify a bunch of white women and say, hey, when the first plane crash, I don't know they had a plane crash maybe a couple weeks after Trump became the president. And Trump came out and said it was DEI. You think it would be, and there was
the helicopter, the Black Hawk helicopter that crashed in.
It was no black
folks with the American Airlines.
There was no black folks involved in that. I think it was white folks involved in it. There was no black folks. They playing DEI, which I'm assuming they meant white women. The reason
that's not what he meant. He thought that the flight control people that were at work that had at that situation. He thought that they were.
Oh, but they weren't. So he assumed they were, but they weren't. Right. I thought because I think one of the pilots was a woman, and I think they was being critical of her. So that was my thought process. I think one of the helicopter pilots was a woman pilot, so I thought they was being critical of her. So he may have thought erroneously that a black person was involved in it, although we weren't. The point you're making is right. They use the word DEI. What they've been doing is they've been getting rid of anything that reflects black. So if they mention a black person, we're going to get rid of it. If you mention a black person's name, we're getting rid of it. Jackie Robinson, we ain't doing it.
Well, the fact is, at least in my opinion, the whole concept of DEI used to be called multiculturalism. At one time, it was referred to as affirmative action. In fact, there's a book called When Affirmative Action Was White. But all those things, all those euphemisms are ways of trying to address the ongoing effects of not just past, but ongoing discrimination without anybody having to admit that they were guilty of discrimination. That was Robert's point in the Harvard case when he said, the programs that are targeted at so-called eliminating societal discrimination that can't be quantified and haven't been quantified can no longer be constitutionally supported. Because they have no beginning, they have no end, they have no when. For example, I had somebody. What does diversity really mean? How diverse are we? My own definition is we've got a diverse situation when there's enough black folk that we can talk to one another, but not enough to make white folk feel uncomfortable because we're there. You know what I mean? That's when you've achieved diversity, because there is no definition otherwise. No, that DEI has never been defined. And the interesting thing is, on this whole topic, I mean, we could go on and on. The concept of reparations, people don't really understand. Reparations mean white folk got to pay black folk. No, the country owes reparations. And the same way that Stephen Miller, Trump's deputy chief of staff, is now calling for reparations for the people who were locked up, the rioters that were locked up, the insurrectionists that were locked up following January 6th. And he even broader than that, he wants reparation for all the people, particularly the white people, who suffered under Joe Biden's administration.
So a couple things. I think the reparation point goes to my point as well. We talk about DEI, and they try to hide the lead. The idea is that anything black is offensive and is wrong. So when they talk about DEI, they go to universities and say, hey, they're not just saying we don't want you to have a DEI policy, but they're saying that as well. But they're also saying anything that refers to a black person or black people's struggle. So they mention slavery, get rid of it.
Right.
I don't see. Black history is American history. What blacks went through in this country was American history, is American history. The idea that you remove it is is contrary. It's almost like they try to change what actually happened in the
But they don't want a generation of white kids growing up thinking they owe something to black kids.
I don't think they think that. I don't even think because they don't think that now. I don't think there's any generation of people who think they owe something to black people because there's been no offer to pay it. The idea is we don't even want to have the idea that we are less than, that the action that was done by whites how many years ago was action that was wrong, so we're going to ignore it and cover it up. We're going to ignore the idea that slavery was wrong. We're going to ignore the idea that Jim Crow was wrong. We're going to ignore the idea that these people in this country had contributed to the country and to the fabric of the nation in a real way, and we're going to erase them. We want to erase them from politics, erase them from the thought process, erase from history in a way that we can say this is our country. And they've done it already. We see very few examples of Native American brothers and sisters. You see very few examples of any other American other than white American in history. We had Chinese Americans come to this country early on and build railroads. You never hear about their contributions. You have Japanese Americans that came here after Pearl Harbor, and they were internment camps. They don't come here anymore in large numbers. But only people you see in this country, you hear about, are the white residents, not the actual other. There's so many Native Americans here, you would never see them. You don't even know their contributions. I was looking at his actions against HBCUs or his attempts to use DEI as a weapon, and I didn't realize we have Native American universities, tribal universities as well. He's been embraced of those as well. The country has consistently wanted to be homogenous in a way of white. I can't pass. There's nothing I can do in my lifetime or my children's lifetime, my parents to pass. Nothing about me can pass. I walk in the room, it's readily apparent I'm a black person. Most black folks walk in the room, it's apparent who we are. We can't hide it.
I've been confused with
never. That's never happened in the history of time.
I seem to remember it.
That's never happened in the history of time. So, but as a result, it's somehow our being places is offensive. When we succeed, it's offensive. When we develop, and I don't mean being entertainers, I don't mean us dancing, I don't mean us playing sports. When we succeed and build our communities, every time it's happened since slavery, it's been knocked back down.
Because the notion that we are property, and therefore less than human, has never been advocated, has never been abandoned. The notion that we are no more than 3/5 of a person has never been advocated. And the interesting thing, it was the North that insisted on that so-called 3/5 compromise. The South was more than anxious to have all the freed slaves vote because they could control the vote. Yeah. It was the North who said no. The so-called North that said no, and said no. We only get 3/5 of a person from every black person. So the idea that we are less than, that we are inherently, innately, inextricably, and irreversibly less than human is still very much a fabric of what we believe. And unfortunately, there's too many black people that still believe it. Let me say it another way. There's a bunch of black folk who still believe today, this very minute, that white folks' ice is colder. You know it, and I know it. In our profession, we see it every day. I've seen it for the last 53 years. I didn't get my first major black client in business until that company realized that I already was representing a white company that was its competitor. Then the recognition, oh well, you know, if this company if you're good enough to represent them, you must be good enough to be. In other words, until I was anointed, until there was some indication to black folk that I was acceptable to white people, black folk didn't want nothing to do with me. And I'm sure it happened to you, and that's true generally.
That point goes to a larger point. I don't think it's an African American thing or blacks in this country. I think it's a worldwide thing. I think worldwide, our brothers and sisters, whether they're in Brazil or Caribbean or Africa, there's always been some kind of occupation of black spaces by people who aren't black. There's always been some kind of control. In the West, blacks are here because of slavery. I mean, directly, whether it's Brazil or Jamaica or Antigua or America, they're here because of slavery. And they were colonized, and so the culture of slavery was there. But our black brothers on the continent, they had colonizers. Whether it's France, whether it was the Dutch, whether it was the Brits, whether it was the Americans, they're in their communities, and they assume things made by the Americans or by the Europeans are better than things made back home. That's the nature of how black people live in the world. As we say black means anyone with the same color skin. Even though we live in different countries, a person from Eritrea and a person from East Baltimore may have different views on the world and different ideas about how the world works. They're both considered black. and because they share enough in common about their history, about where they're from, about how the world treats them, where they can be considered black and not be a surprise as to their similar situation. There's a constant effort to keep blacks at a certain place. And you're right, some black folks may buy into it. They have been trained that white folks have better ideas and better things. But the reality is, any person that's been past 12th grade in school can recognize that the fact that you're white or Asian or Hispanic doesn't mean that you're better or smarter. I've been in class, I'm sure you have been, with people from all over the world and all different ethnicities. I can guarantee you, the fact that they didn't like me didn't mean they were smarter than me in any way.
I've never seen a movie about I've never seen a movie about black snow. It's always Snow White. I've never seen, and that, tests have been done. If you give the dolls to a bunch of kids, one white baby doll with blonde hair and blue eyes, and one black with so-called nappy hair. To this day, most of those kids, black and white,
there's preferences. People have preferences.
That's because, and you're not born with that. We're not born black or white. Those are cultural concepts, and those are cultural restraints that the kids are being taught. And that's what wokeism. We want to get rid of wokeism. That means we want to stop teaching that white kids have a privilege because they're white. Now we all know that that's why when Representative Jasmine Crockett says there's no such thing as a black unqualified person getting a job, because our grandmothers told us we had to be twice as good to get the job that a white man had. Otherwise, and Trump said, we were restricted to so-called black jobs.
So, and my point exactly, when we talk about people leaving jobs, the reason we had DEI in the first place is because they won't hire you.
Right.
It's not a situation where they're giving black folks an unqualified job, like, you get a job, you get a job. No, it's, hey, you have how much more education than we have? Okay, we'll hire you. We'll hire you, pay you less, even though with more education. That's the nature of being black in this country. No, it doesn't happen all the time. No, I'm sure there's blacks who have great jobs and get paid great funds and equal to everyone else. More often than not, we are better than everyone else. So I say better, more qualified than everyone else in that same workforce. But the issue I want to connect with two issues of Trump using DEI to mean everything black, including the museums, and the idea of reparations for white people or people who aren't black. The conservative community has been adverse to the idea of reparations as if it's offensive. And their argument has been, it's not our fault they were slaves, we didn't do this to them. And then your point is right. We're not asking if you go in your pocket pay me money. We're saying the government to which the black community has supported and uplifted and funded our whole existence, owes a duty to these people. Miller said the same thing. The government owes duty.
Right.
He's not saying Tom, Dick, and Harry. No, the government owes duty to these people because they lost out because of this. And he's openly hoping for reparations and taking on the language because he thinks it's reasonable because it's an offense. I suspect, and I don't know Miller very well, I don't know at all actually. I suspect that he would be against reparations for black folks, but it wouldn't be the same thing for him against people who are his base and he consider to have lost.
That's for sure. But why are so many black people find the notion of reparations offensive?
I was talking to a friend about that, and so one, I believe in reparations. I'll put this in, but I have a different view of what reparations are. I don't necessarily think we need checks. I think reparations should be a system where our kids get quality education, which they've never gotten. I went to school in Baltimore City. I went to some horrible schools. My school was almost all black. I grew up in segregated America. I grew up in an all-black community. All my friends were black. What that did for me was meant everyone I knew was black, whether they was smart or not smart, they all were black. But what it also meant was it was able to keep us at a certain place. And because we had poor quality education, most of the people didn't leave the schools I went to and go to college. And it was very few who went to college. And the ones who didn't always make it out. So we have in this country unequal education. We've had it since before Brown v. Board. We've had it, Brown v. Board tried to ameliorate it. It did not work. And we still have situations in around the country where our young people don't have options. What we see, and as an employer, as an attorney, as a person who lives in the community, we see people who commit crimes and high crime rate and people who don't have education. If you go down to any courthouse, certainly in Baltimore, and watch the people who go into jail and get prosecuted, 95% of them didn't finish high school. And the school they went to, people could barely read and write. So the issue we have in our community is education. So we talk about reparations. For me, it's close to home. we got to find a way to, I don't give it $1 billion, $10 billion. It shouldn't be a black person's country who are going through the school they go through in any real way. I mean, people who have PhDs in education. If I can teach a kid how to read, they can teach a kid how to read. They've been able to modify and fix schools. If you know how to fix one, you can fix them all. So my view on reparations is a little different. I don't necessarily want to check. I want to build our community in a way that's sustainable, in a way that people can learn how to think themselves, in a way people can learn how to have discernment, in a way people can figure things out, in a way people can understand the world beyond their own environment. That's what my view of reparations are. But reparations are common. Like, think about this. This country, when people came here from Europe, they gave people land, they gave people, they built schools, they gave land grants. Dr. King talked about this before he was assassinated. He talked about the idea that we took a reparation for blacks, but we gave rights. We gave them property. We put them in college and learn how to farm the property.
160 acres under the Homestead Act of 1801.
The country has been generous with not only with Americans. We went to Europe and rebuilt. We
Japanese got reparation, and Jews are still being paid by the Holocaust Commission in Germany.
We rebuilt Germany out. That money comes from American coffers. We rebuilt Germany. Germany isn't a black country. In case you out there don't know, it's not a black country. We rebuilt Europe after World War II. We went in and built. The reason that they they deferred us so much because we went and built the economy. If we can go and say, we'll take care of you guys, even though you were killing each other, we'll help you guys out. You're right. The Japanese did get reparations for the internment camp. Even though the court said, no, the U.S., you guys are right. You guys are fine. You can keep people in internment camps. We still paid them and said, know what? Our transgression was so over the top. We had to pay you for it. And in Europe, you're right. Germany and the Holocaust Commission, they still act in ways to support people who are Jewish and Jewish faith because of what happened to them. We can't close our eyes and act like we don't know that slavery happened, or Jim Crow happened, or separate but equal happened, or redlining happened. We can't close our eyes to the fact that happened. The reason blacks in this country, people give an example. We have a race between a black person and a white person. The white person have a head start. It's not they have a head start. They run it and we still standing still. They have both. They have the head start and they already run it before the gun goes off. You can't keep a situation, President Obama would say all the time, "The rising tides rise our boats." It's a fallacy. It did, but it's still equal. You still guarantee the lead the other party has. So if they rise our boats, you still up here. It doesn't get any level of restitution or equality for anyone. And the reality is, it don't always rise our boats because the boats that we are in are sinking to the bottom of the ocean, and the boats they're in are rising higher and higher and higher. It has to be. It can't just be reparations are wrong when it comes to black folks. That can't be the standard. And what we've seen is that's been the standard. What we've seen is black folks are against it because, from what I've seen, they feel like we're begging for something. We want something. We want unfair treatment. People have used language to be very interested and to be very methodical to change how people view things. If you're begging for things that you don't deserve, it seems unreasonable. If you demand equality, it sounds different. And when people say reparations, they talk about it in terms of we're begging for the country to give us something that we don't deserve or we don't have a right to, versus saying, hey, no, I don't want what I don't have a right to. I want to quantify what we've done to from slaves, whether slavery or Jim Crow, to what they benefited from their illegal actions. It wasn't illegal then. It was morally reprehensible then. It's illegal now. And we're saying because of that, we built the country. And we haven't had any economists come out and say that blacks are wrong. No one's come out and say they're wrong. We didn't build a country. If we built the country and we said we were slaves at the time, we got no benefit from it. We want some reimbursement. That's different than saying give me a free job or give me some free money.
Well, let's talk about the color that in the final analysis may make more difference than any other. And green. How do we get into the hands of black folks and others who have been denied the opportunity to acquire income, and which can be ultimately converted into wealth? How do we right that ship? How do you do that in an economy that's based upon make it, take it? That's without any. There's no place in capitalism where the concept of enough is enough becomes relevant. It's all how much do you need more? How do you know? I just need more. Well, how much more? More. There's no cap on it. There's no limitation on it. That it's as much as you can get, as fast as you can get it from anybody who you can get it from. Even in law, you remember in school, the original concept was buyer be caveat emptor, buyer beware. The idea of protecting consumers against fraudulent sales or defective products, those are modern day concepts that are that are contrary to the laws that were brought to this country. So how do we correct that? What economy can we argue for, or what economy can we try to create that will stop greed and avarice and on a collective basis? Now I'm not talking individually, because there's always been individuals who were successful during slavery. There were black slave owners during Reconstruction, during Jim Crow. There have always, but how do we, as a group, provide to the group? Not everybody in the group will accomplish it, but how do we provide to a group? What kind of economy do we provide that will allow the group itself to recognize that it has the opportunity? And isn't that one of the reasons why the civil rights movement fizzled out? Because nobody defined what success was. How do we know when would the day come when we would have civil rights, or when would equality? How would we know that we have achieved equality?
I don't think the civil rights movement fizzles out. I think people got a certain level of application. Once the civil rights movement was successful, that the Brown v. Board went forward, and kids go to schools that were integrated, blacks could move to communities that were integrated, and you felt like you had a bigger piece of the pie. You felt like you actually made it. Now, that's before my time. Again, I grew up in segregated America. I didn't grow up in a multi-racial.
Well, I did too, and I think I'm better for it.
I feel better for it too. Yeah. So that part, I grew up not knowing I was segregated in America. Yeah. I recall my first time seeing someone who wasn't black. We was downtown in the harbor. I saw the mayor. It was what was the mayor? Not Kurt Smoke. It was Schaefer. Yeah. My mom was like, "Hey, that's the mayor Schaefer." I looked up. Oh, okay. I didn't even know what that meant. I realized he was a white guy, yeah. And because we didn't have much means, so we didn't typically leave. I grew up in a small community in Baltimore called Cherry Hill. We didn't particularly leave there that often. I recall seeing him, oh, that's the mayor. It's okay. It didn't really mean anything to me, but I recognized it was different than my mom and then my father and my uncles and the mailman and my school teachers. He was a different person.
Right.
There was no curiosity. I just recognized it. The reality is many people did go to other communities and were able to live different lifestyles, and they were able to join jobs, and they were able to work around people who were different than them. Keep in mind, for a long time, we worked in environments where we were subservient. So before the idea of the civil rights movement, we got jobs, but we were boys, right? If you go to work, all right, get up, boy, over there and clean up the back, instead of you being a stockbroker or being a lawyer or being an engineer or being a doctor. So once we got a certain level of attainment, which was beyond people's wildest dreams, I can guarantee you, 3 or 4 generations back, people couldn't imagine I would be a lawyer as their relative. They couldn't fathom the idea that a black person would be an attorney. So once they started,
were you the first in your family to go to college?
In my immediate family, I have uncles who went to college, but in my immediate family, my mother and father, yes. Right. I had uncles, my mother's brothers had been to college, my father's brothers had been to college. But my immediate family, yes. But 2 or 3 generations back, we've been poor so long, people who are not poor now are still poor, right? So we are 1 generation away from not having anything. And even our brothers and sisters in America who say, oh, my family, my grandparents had means. The means they have was different than the means their white counterparts have. If they had means, they were the first person in the family that had means. So we've been separated from that. So once people got jobs, got cars, got the American life, got to have houses, they were placated. So there was no more fight. There was no, once you can go to restaurants and spend your money and you can be equal, they felt there was no more fight. And that was the way they were able to break down and diminish the idea that we got to push for more. We still have a ways to go.
Well, I grew up on the Eastern Shore in Salisbury, and when I grew up, there were all black schools and all white schools, and there were colored drinking fountains and white drinking fountains. And there was one movie we could go to, but we only could sit in the balcony. And the white park had a swimming pool and a zoo, and we had a mud hole and swings in our park. And we were better off for it because our teachers were trying to equip us to be twice as good to get a better job. Our teachers, knew they were accountable to our parents and grandparents because they lived next door. They were accountable because they couldn't go anywhere but to the same stores to shop, and the same churches to worship, and the same businesses. We accepted the fact, and we thrived upon the fact that we were not just all we had, but we were all we needed. But we lost all of that. But you know, as all good things must come someday, they say, to an end. So does this discussion.
But before you go past that, so you make a point. Some black folks don't believe in reparations. Some black folks don't believe in issues that we have going forward. I think there are very few blacks in the country who see what's going on with the black universities, the museums, the firing of black folks. Very few blacks, whether you're conservative or liberal, agree with what's going on because it's very clear. If not you, then your mother, your brother, your cousin. The idea that they're coming for us directly, if people feel that. It's many conservative blacks. Hold up. What y'all doing? Y'all went too far. We didn't mean to go this far because it's very. Your existence is in danger when you see the country operate in an adverse way against the people who look like you. Because again, most of them you can't hide who you are. You can say, oh, I'm rich, so I'm black, but you're still black. If we walk in the room, people know who we are. You can't hide it. They know who your family is.
Well, you know, again, we've come to the end. Next week, we're going to engage in a discussion over a topic that I've been trying to get an answer to for a long time. What does it mean to be a black college or university? What does it mean to be a black bank? What does it mean to be a black institution? Those are intriguing questions, and we think that maybe it's time that black people started answering them for ourselves. Anyway. Yes, this is the maiden voyage of Money, Power, and Politics. I hope that you found our discussion interesting, and that you are encouraged to go out and educate yourself as much as you can, to read, to listen. Come back next week. Money, Power, and Politics. Robert DeShiel, Hassan Barnes. Have a good day.
Take care, guys.
And we're done.